Hi, this is Datos Leo. For this video, I'll share with you my analysis on common winning paths of the Slay the Spire game. I'm curious about the general pathing trends of Ascension 20 winning runs. Using data, I would like to discover how often most players select the unknown, merchant, treasure, rest, enemy, and elite locations in a complete successful run. I hope you find these insights useful. A big disclaimer here. I'm no expert in this game, but I have background in crunching data. So I'll be using Ascension 20 winning runs data from the collected data from most players, specifically the November 2020 runs. Then this analysis only reflects the players and not the game itself. So this is not the perfect strategy, but this reflects what the player have made in this game. So this is my data-driven attempt to learn the game. If you're not familiar with this game, usually at the start of the game, you start with a map and the player selects which among the location are selected. The biggest question here in this analysis is, for a complete winning run, how frequent do most players select these 6 map locations? I would like to take note that we will use the Ascension 20 winning runs, specifically for runs that have already defeated the heart. So actually, we were able to collect Ascension 20 winning runs from my previous video. For the methodology, I'll use the path taken portion of the run file. So as you can see, for each run, there's a list of the path being taken by the player. So as you can see, it is represented by this abbreviated value such as letter M for monster or the enemies, question mark for the unknowns, R for rest or campfire, E for elites, dollar sign for merchants or store, T for treasure. So I'll be collecting multiple run file and create a data frame where it counts the number of locations in a single run. So note that for each row represents a run, and each column counts the selected location in a complete run. And later on, I'll create a histogram to count or plot the count distribution for most runs. In histogram, you'll be able to have an idea where most players have the most common count. Then later on, I'll create an additional exploratory data analysis in which I'll implement clustering to group runs that have similar pattern. Not only that, I'll test if there's a cluster. So I'll do cluster tendency test. Once I create a cluster, I'll create another histogram again just to compare the count distribution between cluster. Later on, I'll present my Python script or my notebook on how I was able to implement this methodology using the data. Hi, this will be a short preview of my script in this analysis. First, I collected the data. Next is I created function that will count the number of map locations in the path taken portion of the run. From that, I was able to create a data frame that will be used to create cluster. So as you can see, I evaluated the right number of cluster using 2 methods. And next is once I was able to identify the right number of cluster, use this number, in this case 2 is the optimal number of cluster to create cluster. Then I did some basic exploratory data analysis on the distribution, the mean and standard deviation for each group. And next is a created function on generating histogram for all map location. So as you can see, these are the plots. So I generated multiple graphs that I'll be used for the presentation. So I hope this analysis will be helpful for your future analysis, and I hope this might improve your gameplay. And that's all. Thank you. For the results of my analysis, I created 6 histogram that will show the count distribution for the 6 map locations for the majority of the runs. So as you can see, you'll have an idea of the right distribution of the most common number of path that being taken by the players. So I created the ideal number of range that is between 10% and 90% tile. So as you can see, the most common path for the aggregated map locations is for the unknowns, it's around 8 to 14. Merchants or shop, it's between 3 to 6. Treasure for 3. Rest or campfire is between 7 to 11. Enemies or monsters is between 9 to 15. Elites is between 6 to 11. Results showed that there are 2 common paths. But before that, I did some cluster tendency test, and it shows that it has a cluster. As a result, there is no one ideal path. Next, I did some cluster evaluation using k-means clustering, and it shows that there are 2 significant cluster. So I did count the number of runs that belongs to these 2 cluster. So upon clustering, it shows that there are 2 common trend. One is some runs has more enemies path in exchange of unknowns, and the other one is having more unknowns in exchange of enemies. So as you can see, the more enemies the one have, it is compensated by the unknowns, and vice versa. So the more enemy spot is represented by the green color, the more unknowns is represented by the orange ones. So as you can see, there are 2 common paths. So I created 6 histogram for each map locations. And I embedded the cluster. The green one is for the more enemies path, and the orange is for the more unknowns path. As you can see, for the location, merchants, treasures, rest, and elites, they purely have the same distribution. And when it comes to unknowns and enemies, they are different. So it fairly shows that there are 2 ways to play this game. One is having more enemies, fighting more enemies, and the other one is getting more unknowns. So I did some count for each class or for each character. As you can see, there's a balanced number of cluster size. So use this chart as your cheat sheet, as your guide on the number of map locations that is being collected in a complete run. The key takeaway for this study is there are two ways to play this game. One way is to play more enemies. Second is the more unknowns. So here I created the path taken count distribution table. So as you can see, for both the more enemies and more unknowns path, they have fairly number of merchant, treasure, rest, and elite. The only difference between those is that the more enemies path have the unknowns of 7-11 and misses between 12 to 16. For the more unknowns path, the unknown is between 11 to 15 and the enemies is between 9 to 13. I hope this study or my analysis could help you improve your game. And that's all. Thank you.